All right, welcome in everybody. It's another edition of HR Lunch Bunch here from HR Answers. It is the month of September, and we are very blessed to be joined by Monique Little. She is the official title here, Chief People and Administrative Officer at First Tech Federal Credit Union. First Tech Federal Credit Union. That's a mouthful.
I know the title and the company name.
I just
Good
have
job,
known
Deborah.
Monique forever. I mean,
Ever.
I think it's at least, well, pre-children. I mean, so
Yes.
over
Yes.
20 years. So,
Absolutely over 20 years.
you
Yeah.
know, a few hairstyles ago, a few children, you know, just a few things here and there. And and truly we are blessed because Monique has been in HR for quite some time and has been with a number of organizations and has done a variety of things and has seen HR from a variety of viewpoints and been able to bring her organizations great success in a variety of ways. And so being able to say to her, hey, what would you like to talk about? Because the field is wide open. So when she kind of said, let's talk about AI and what's it doing in the HR space and what's it doing for business, I was like, I'm all in. Let's talk because it's a topic, it's hot, it's growing in intensity. I think our organizations have a lot to learn. I think we as HR are going to be on the forefront of that in a variety of ways. And so, welcome into HR Answers, not only, well, HR Answers, HR Lunch Bunch, Monique, and all of our guests. If this is your first time with us, we do the first Wednesday of every month. We meet from noon to 1. We've been doing this for over 16 years. And today, the chat box is open so you can communicate that way. You can definitely unmute yourself. So please do. It's intended to be interactive. This isn't a one-way street. So we want to hear from you, questions, what's working, not working, what are you doing in this space? But truly, we have registrations from Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Texas. Did I miss one? And outside of the Philippines. People are hot for this topic, Monique. So
Wow. Well, maybe that's why they're not here yet, because there's a time difference depending on where they're calling from. So
I hope they didn't turn in too early or they're coming too late.
exactly. Well, that's awesome. And thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I know we were chatting at the top of the call about the 16 years of the HR Lunch Bunch. And I do recall coming in person, and it may have been in those very early years. I'm pretty sure it was. So that's awesome that clearly there's a need and a craving for a place to learn together and have conversation. And this topic for sure, I'm going to preface today's conversation with, I am by no means an expert in what technology and AI and automation are doing to the workplace, but I've been fortunate to be in an organization at First Tech for the last 17 years who has really leaned in to technology and looking at how it can transform the business in really exciting ways, both for our customers, but also for our employees. So I'm going to share some of my learnings today, but I also invite those of you that are joining to chat in. I may even pose a couple of questions so we can learn from each other as we go through this conversation. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a little bit of content. I don't know. I'm a visual learner, so I'm going with what works for me. And for those of you that like seeing something while you're listening, hopefully this is working. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, let's get right to it. Thank you for the kind introduction, Deborah. I thought I would just share a couple of other little tidbits about myself, some work related and some not. I'm going to start by saying I am an avid, and Deborah knows this, I think, about me. I'm an avid Oregon State Beaver fan. I was born an Oregon Stater. I'm an Oregon State alumni, and the Beavers are in rough times, but I still bleed orange. And I've got two sons now in attendance at Oregon State. So I have another reason to be really vested in the Beavers. But the other thing that I wanted to share a little bit about my background, Deborah said I've worked for a few organizations. I've spent 30 years in financial services. And my first job was in human resources, and I knew I had found my home in a profession that I thought was exciting and interesting, and where I could really make an impact. But I think what's been most exciting for me about my journey is that by leaning on the skills that I've learned as a human resource professional and leader, it has allowed me to expand my experience in the workplace well beyond human resources. So I do have a title that is a mouthful, but I wanted to give you a little context. As Chief Administrative Officer at First Tech, I actually have responsibility for running all of our operations. So it's sort of a quasi COO role. And so I have responsibility for the people function as the Chief People Officer, but also running all of the operations, really everything that doesn't touch our customers directly, but that supports and enables all of the customer delivery for the organization. So as we talk about automation, I'm particularly going to share some examples and some use cases that very much center around how operations at my organization has benefited from automation and AI. But how HR has really helped enable that transformation. So that I wanted to give you that context and framing as we get into the conversation. So just a little bit about me, and I also love everything that has to do with kids. One, because I'm a mom, but also because I have the pleasure of working for an organization who's one of the leading fundraisers for CMN hospitals in the country. And so you see the connection there, that I have the privilege of working with our friends at Dornbecker Children's Hospital and at Seattle Children's Hospital in the state of Washington. So another sort of passion and tidbit about my background. Let me tell you a little bit about First Tech, again, just for some framing of our conversation today. So First Tech is actually one of the largest credit unions in the nation. And admittedly, when I came to work for the organization, I knew very little about First Tech at all. And what's unique about our organization, and why this conversation I think is particularly interesting, is that we were founded in technology. So our credit union was actually started by a couple of tech companies that you're probably familiar with, depending on where you live, and Microsoft and Hewlett Packard, and Amazon, and even companies like Nike, who are not technology companies, but who really center technology in how they deliver the products and services to their customers. So we are an organization who serves technology-oriented companies and their employees. So we look a little different than your average financial institution. But that also means that our customers are all over the nation and all over the world. And technology is really the way that they engage with us predominantly. I'm also really, really proud about the organization's accomplishments. We are one of the healthiest employers. We are one of the strongest philanthropists in our markets. And, we're really leading into industry leadership, not just in financial services, but in other ways. So that's just a little bit of background to give you, again, some framing for our conversation. And please chat in if you have any questions throughout our conversation, and offer some thoughts. So I'm going to start with a question, because I think we can all say that technology is changing the way our business works. It doesn't matter what industry we're in, the shape or size of our company, the geographic spread of the organization. In some way, shape, or form, technology is making an impact. But what I would love to know, since there are some familiar and not so familiar faces and names on the call today, but I would love to invite you to chat in, just so we kind of know what are the industries that are represented today, the types of companies, as we talk about technology and its influence. So I'll just invite you all to chat in for a quick minute so we get that context.
So in the chat box, we have senior services, manufacturing,
Awesome.
cannabis,
Okay.
which also has, but someone's also worked in commercial driving and manufacturing. And then we also have language services.
Okay. Ooh, I like it. I like the diversity. Well, if you're in manufacturing, then you probably may the picture on the bottom left might not look that foreign to you. And I've been reading about what Amazon is doing in leveraging, you know, robotics and technology and automation in some of their distribution, and so certainly we're seeing with some of the biggest employers, but also like I said, all shapes and sizes are seeing technology transform. So thinking about, and again, I'm going to share with you how it has been transforming financial services. And I think what I want to talk about today is not just how technology is showing up and transforming, but more importantly, what is the role that human resources has or can have in that transformation? And what are some of the tangible things that each of us can be thinking about and taking back to our business? What are the conversations we should be having? And how do we find ourselves as HR leaders in the room and helping facilitate some of the change that either we're seeing today or we may see in the future? So I want to make sure that we kind of cover all of that in the conversation. So I wanted to level set just a little because I think I am still learning, and I found this definition or sort of this journey of AI rather interesting, because I think many times we think about, you know, the adoption of automation and AI as being something that's really, really new. And in reality, it's not. And organizations and just the world around us has really had artificial intelligence and technology and automation really influencing in ways perhaps that we didn't realize. And so I found this particularly interesting, but also sort of context setting in terms of, you know, artificial intelligence really coming about in the late 50s. And I think what's particularly interesting, though, is the speed of evolution and adoption that we are now seeing in the business space around us. And I don't know about you, but I've been, you know, continuing to follow, of course, Chat GPT and all of the competing technologies. And even in financial services, at First Tech, we had a conversation with our board just about a month ago about, hey, is Chat GPT or is the concept of generative AI, is that even relevant to financial services? And if so, in what way? And so I think it's prudent, even though we might think, oh, it doesn't relate to the work that we're doing, it's probably not going to touch our business. The reality is it really probably will. And it probably will sooner than we're expecting. So getting in the conversation and promoting the conversation in our organizations, I think is a really good thing for HR to be able to help do. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about automation and how we're using automation and artificial intelligence at First Tech. So I'll specifically talk about some automation, but machine learning is also something that we're seeing really start to take a front seat in financial services as well, particularly as we start to understand all of the vast amounts of data that we have about our customers, whom in the credit union space we call members, and how those members choose to engage with their financial institution. And using that information, we can use machine learning to predict how Deborah likes to do business with her financial institution. Does she do it on her mobile device? Does she do it on her computer, desktop during her lunch break at the office? Or does she walk in to her local branch to conduct her transactions? And by using that data, we can enable machine learning to understand when it's really Deborah and when it's actually an imposter that's coming in, a bad actor, if you will, to impersonate Deborah by taking over her device, by maybe even coming in and pretending to be Deborah. And so those are some of the ways that financial services is actually using machine learning in order to protect the safety and security of the consumer, but also of the organization. So that's a little bit about machine learning, but let's talk about kind of a real life use case where I think HR has been instrumental in helping transform a business. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background about how technology is showing up in banking. And I shared with you earlier that one of my areas of responsibility is running the operations of the credit union. And so today I'm going to talk about one area of that operations, which is our payment processing activity. And so you probably have had direct deposit, or maybe you've sent a P2P transaction to pay a friend when you decided to split dinner. Or perhaps you needed to send a wire because you were going to purchase a house and you needed to get your closing costs processed with the title company. So those are just some of the everyday transactions that customers are executing each and every day. And so that's one of the areas that I have the pleasure of having responsibility for at the credit union. So moving money is something that, we take for granted, but it happens every day. And usually with just a touch of our cell phone, we just quickly, get the phone out, and with a couple clicks, off the money goes to its destination. But in reality, in the back of the room, behind the curtain, there's a lot of things that have to happen for your money to get from institution A to institution B, from person A to person B. And then there's this thing called settlement, where the Federal Reserve, the bank, we need to actually make sure that there are funds from destination 1 to destination 2 and make sure that the money gets settled in that transaction. So these types of activities are happening day in and day out in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions throughout the course of the year. And while, again, seamless to the consumer, there are a lot of steps and things that happen in the back room. At First Tech, we operate about 17 different systems in order to process the millions and millions of different payments transactions, but also the different types of payments that consumers are executing. And as you can imagine, those systems and those different transactions all have different processes associated with them, and perhaps different touch points along the journey to get from point A to point B. And so here is a prime example of an area that we said is ripe for automation and really leaning into technology. So wires was a great example. And again, think of the example that I gave earlier of needing to buy a home. Or maybe we have a lot of members that live internationally because we serve members in 30 different countries. And so oftentimes they might be sending some money home to friends and family that they might be supporting in their home country while they're working here in the United States. And so that transaction was taking multiple steps. In some cases, that wire journey could be 105 touch points. If you think about each and every little thing and entry that has to happen and review that has to happen of that entry to get from multiple systems all the way to the final destination. So by leveraging automation, we were able to take the 105 steps down to five steps that are touched by a person, right? And the systems are doing the lion's share of the work, from decisioning, depending upon the nature of the wire that's initiating, as to what checkpoint needs to happen, what review, whether it's an exception, whether it's routine, and how it gets processed. And oh, by the way, when we used automation, we went from a transaction where the member would have to wait about 20 minutes to get the process completed, the initiation of the process completed. The actual wire might take a couple of days, down to about a 5-minute exercise. So delightful customer experience, but even more delightful, if you can imagine, for team members that were processing had 105 steps. But maybe a transformation that might have created a little bit of angst, right? If you think about it, 105 steps takes a lot more human capital than 5 steps. And the nature of the work, moving a piece of data or entering a piece of data from system A to system B, looks very different than the nature of the work today. So as you can imagine, this transformation didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without some change management that was involved, right? So exciting to see what automation and what technology can do to transform the business. But even more important was, how do we make this transformation happen and bring our people along in that journey? That's where the role of our HR business partner and our team in the human resources department really played a transformational role. So let's talk about what they did to partner with the business. So
So,
yes,
Monique,
let
can
me
I ask a
pause.
question? So, in that particular scenario, then this was very much a people-oriented set of steps in terms of on the employee side of things,
Yes.
reducing all of this.
And even a bit, Deborah, it's a great question. And as you can imagine, when you go from 20 minutes to 5 minutes as the customer, there are actually more steps for the customer in the 20-minute scenario than there ended up being in the 5-minute scenario, right? So it also, automation and technology was also about, how do we delight the customer to make things simpler, quicker, right? And easier to do, because really they don't care about the process. They just want to send money. And so it's the question of, well, what's the job that the consumer wants to do, and how do we make it as easy and seamless as possible, so it's as effortless as it can possibly be.
Well, and when I first kind of saw your slide and where I thought you were going was more about the fact that this was a user experience and going
Mm.
from 105 steps to 20 minutes to 5 minutes. And I was, quote, doing all the work. And because so much of what I'm kind of experiencing is, Deborah, it's more self-driven. Your benefits enrollment. Here's your link. Go take care of it. Here's your access codes. Go take care of things. It's now user do everything, and we have fewer and fewer, quote, people, whatever it is, to aid and support. And it's like, hey, I actually want to go to my financial institute and I want you to do the work. I don't really want to do it. I still operate with cash and I still like to go to the bank and or the credit union and here's my check. I actually really didn't like the decision of automatic deposit. I don't feel like I have any money because I can't touch it anymore. I never see any transactions happening. I'm very old school. I'll just admit it. So everything is so out there, cloud based. Here's your kiosk. I'm like, is anybody out there to help me anymore? So it's just, that's where my head first went. I'm like, okay, she's talking the employee side. She's not even talking my side of the equation, quote unquote. And so that's a lot of where AI and automation and technology is going is here you go. You do it all. And it's like, wait a minute. Now, I mean, if we talk about job elimination and things like that, it's like even even Kroger, Fred Meyer has a couple of stores back east. There are no more people at the register. It's all self-checkout. And
Mm-hmm.
they're demoing it in terms of trying it out to see whether or not they're going to go that route. I don't like that. I
Well,
don't want it.
and I think you're illustrating, kind of the phases that I think that we're seeing with automation, where it was like, okay, well, let's eliminate the work on the company side, right? Let's make it easier so that we can manage operate. It's usually been about managing operational expenses, frankly. How do we contain costs? We put more on the consumer, right? By doing that, saying, oh, well, you just self-serve. What's
Right.
interesting, I think, though, about what you're saying, Deborah, is to remain relevant. I think the next phase that companies need to lean into, though, is how we leverage AI to be able to serve up experiences for the customer where we know it's Deborah coming in. We know how you like to do your shopping at Kroger. And so we serve up a unique experience for you at the checkout versus the same experience for every consumer. Now, we're not there yet. But I will tell you that, especially when we think about banking, that's exactly where financial services is going. And again, even when you think about wires, we know what members send wires all the time. We know what member sends the monthly wire to the family in their foreign home country, right? We know these routine things. And so how do we actually create a more unique experience? Because we know why you're going online. You're going to do your monthly wire transaction versus the one-time experience. So those are ways that we're using AI and machine learning and the technology to serve up a more customized experience to the consumer so that it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, here I go again. I'm keying in all the same information that I did 30 days ago when I was trying to facilitate this transaction. So I think that's that evolution. We're not everybody's not there yet. But I'm so glad you raised that point and surfaced that discussion.
Well, even Terry's chiming in that they're seeing the same concerns with her operation. Um, and and her comment is especially for those that may be more experienced or want or even need that type of personal support. So
Yes.
I'm just thinking maybe even people with disabilities wanting some additional support in some fashion or another. But been a lot of terminology, at least in emails that I'm seeing for people who are pushing things to me. Um, the more personalized approach. Personalized seems to be the word of the month, the quarter, in terms of let's personalize things to you, which is good. And that's how we can use our data is how do we make
Yes.
that we recognize when we get an email and it says hi Deborah, right? Hi Kat, hi Terry, Jessica, and the answer is yes, thank you. Except as long as the rest of the email is also that way and it doesn't have a faux pas in there and you're like
Well,
oopsie.
exactly. And as long as it's personal but not creepy, right? I mean,
You're
because
right.
there is the such thing as, wow, I mean, oh, that's a little too much information. And wow, did they really know that I just Googled something like literally 5 seconds ago? And then I'm served up an ad from that search. It's like, ooh, okay, I'm not sure I love that. Um,
Yes.
but I think there's that striking that balance of yes. So yeah, somebody else is commenting, Terry's commenting about that being scary too. And I would agree, but I think the key I think is personal, relevant, and timely. And I think that's where we're seeing technology and particularly leveraging AI in a way that can be very relevant and again delightful to the experience, not creepy delightful, not creepy. Um So great. I thank you again and for raising that. So yes, so this use case, we're really talking about, there's a win-win here opportunity, right? As we thought about the transformation and leveraging automation to say, okay, how do we make this simple, easy, quick for not just the employees, but also for the customers. And that's really what this was about, is looking for those win-win solutions. But again, a transformation like this does raise questions for employees to say, well, wait a minute, what does this mean for me? And does that mean, am I going to have a job? And, is my job still relevant? And, what is all this going to do to my future? And I still want to stay at the credit union. So I want to talk a little bit about, how we arrived at this change and actually implemented the change, because it was a journey where HR was instrumental in helping facilitate that transformation. So the journey really started with engaging employees in the operations area of the business to say, hey, what do you love about the work you're doing? And what do you not love? Like, where do you see gaps or opportunities? And so the business did one thing that I think was excellent, and I cannot take credit for it, but I'm so pleased to be associated with this team, because they said, we want to adopt a process improvement program in our business. And HR, we want to partner with you as we launch this process improvement program, because we want to recognize employees who are bringing ideas to the table. We want to reward them when those ideas actually are adopted and they come to fruition. And we want to get employees excited about the idea of change. And so by partnering together, they actually built out a program within the operations group, and ideas started flowing in because employees are like, ooh, I can get recognized. Ooh, I can actually get a prize or some reward for this. Like, this could be fun. And then guess what? They put it as a goal for every employee to say they wanted every employee to find one thing. And it could be something really, really small, like we need to update a procedure, but it could be something big, like the process for processing a wire is terrible and onerous, and there's a lot of manual work and there's a lot of data entry. And that's exactly the area that got highlighted through this exercise. So that was piece number one. And then they rewarded those employees who raised those ideas and helped uncover where the biggest pain points were. 105 steps wasn't hard to find a few pain points in that process. And so that really became then the cornerstone of how do we leverage technology and changes in our process to really transform the business. So again, very, very mundane tasks. So number one, employees, instead of saying, woe is me, this is being done to me, and I'm worried about what's going to happen, they actually got excited because they were helping drive the transformation. Wow, it's amazing how employees can really get in the game and actually want to promote the change. But we coupled that with some really, again, intentional work in partnership with HR to say, hey, we know we're going to move their cheese. We know we're going to go from spending a lot of time doing manual entries to very different type of work. And that the skills that they needed to do data entry versus the skills that they're going to need once we automate are going to look different. So with the help of human resources, they did some discovery to say, what are the things that employees, what will we need them to do in the new world once we leverage automation? And the answer to the question was, well, not every wire goes through the process perfectly. Sometimes there are exceptions. Well, guess what? Those exceptions need brain power. They need someone to problem solve. Why was that an exception? Is it because it's a bad actor and we really don't want to process that wire? Is somebody impersonating Deborah and we want to make sure that we protect her? Or is there just something missing that maybe the customer forgot to include as they initiated that transaction, where an outreach maybe needs to happen and some customer service support needs to occur? So, wow, we need people to learn some customer service skills. And sometimes wires don't go the way that we anticipate or the way the customer anticipates. So maybe we want to make sure that those employees are equipped with some empathy training. Um, Perhaps we need to look at some problem solving best practices, and so forth. So the team identified some of those skills, and in partnership with the human resources and learning and development organization, they said, okay, what curriculum do we have available that we can then direct those employees to? So as we're planning for this automation, they're starting to build muscle in some areas perhaps that we haven't tested or stretched before. At the same time, the leadership team said, we probably aren't going to need as many staff at the end of the day. Jobs are simply going to look different. But we might need more resources in other parts of operations. And so we probably should spend some time doing some professional development planning with these employees, because maybe their long-term dream is to work in payments, but maybe it's not. And so why don't, through this process of upskilling, we also do some professional development discovery and do some career planning with those employees. So with the support, again, of their HR business partner, their learning and development partners, they embarked on an effort to meet with every employee within that area to identify what are their career aspirations and how do we start building a development plan that they can not only upskill for the current job, but that they can start to build some skills and a level of readiness for another role. The last thing that the business said is, work is changing all over operations, and this team is processing wires, but the team sitting next to them processes person-to-person payments, or P2P. Think of Venmo type of transactions, right? And guess what? Those are on the rise. People are loving and embracing those. Even my mom sends P2P transactions now. So we know that actually we're going to probably need more resources to support the increase of transaction volume within that space. And so what if we start doing some cross training? We can, one, expose team members to other parts of the business, might be helpful for some of this development and career development planning that we're doing. Two, we have more flexible resources that we can move around within the operations center. And then three, employees are going to get exposure and they're going to become more versed in the operations of the organization. So that's a benefit too. So again, through the partnership, they went through about a year-long process of cross-training, development planning, and upskilling, while simultaneously adopting technology that would take us from the 105 steps to the 5 steps and reduce the processing time. So, and guess what? We didn't forget about the leaders, because that was asking a lot of our leaders to really lean in and really help along that transformation and change. And so again, the HR team came in and said, hey, how are we thinking about change management? Are you familiar with the ADKAR model? How can we help your leaders be better educated and equip them so that they can assess where employees are along that change spectrum and meet them where they are? And so thanks to, again, our partners in human resources and learning and development, they were at the forefront of helping our leaders be better equipped and be able to lead through the change. So I should have hidden all the statistics on the right-hand side of this slide, but I wanted to, and I want to brag a little bit about, when you're intentional and HR really comes in and takes a seat at the table for this transformation, what a difference it can have in the outcomes from a people perspective. And I mean, these results just absolutely, these are very, very recent. I just pulled these results about a week ago. And I mean, they are exceptional. This is an area in payments that, let me tell you, 4 years ago, 3 and 4 years ago, pre-pandemic, because of the mundane nature of the work, and the lack of attention to career development and upskilling and all of this work that this leadership team has been doing in partnership with HR, they had a 40% turnover. So to say that this team now is running at a 91% retention rate over the last 12 months, coming through this transformation where we moved everybody's cheese. And oh, by the way, look at the promotion rate. I mean, these people are growing, some of them growing within wires and payments, and some of them moving to other parts of the business. But how great is that? Because then they're staying with us, right? And we're seeing more and more continuous learning. And this team has some of the highest engagement and satisfaction scores. We're talking in the mid to high 80s in the organization. So the investment of time and that transformation that HR was instrumental in helping lead delivered not only business outcomes where automation is doing exactly what we needed it to do, it's delighting the employees, it's making us more operationally efficient. And hey, we're scaling at cost, and we've got a workforce that's tremendously engaged and succeeding at a very high level. So again, doesn't happen by mistake, but I think a great story about how it can all work together. So I wanted any questions. I'm trying to be mindful of the chat. I hope this is helpful and is giving you sort of a picture about how all this can come together. I want to talk about the role of human resources in this transformation and give you some, I think, nuggets and maybe some ideas about what do you take back to your business just to get the conversation going, or maybe to support transformation that's already happening. So, one of the things that the HR team and particularly our HR business partners have done is to really think about how do we partner as not just a partner who's filling orders and supporting the business along the way, but who's actually sitting in a strategic conversation and helping facilitate that. And so the team really has spent time saying, what are the questions that we should be asking of the business as we're helping them with their annual budgeting or their talent planning, or some of their everyday business decisions that they're trying to make. And so these are some of the things that they have been surfacing for their business partners in the organization, really challenging the business to think about, hey, tell us what's going on in the external environment. Like, what are some things that are keeping you up at night? It could be technology. It could be things happening with labor and, the acquisition of those skills or the scarcity of those skills. So it can lead to all kinds of interesting conversations. They're challenging the business around questions about technology. Are you thinking about changing your technology in the next year or so? In what way? What might that next technology that you adopt or that you move to, how might it change your business? Is it sort of a small change? Is it a great big change? So that they can be prepared to know when and how best to partner. They really have been talking a lot about skill development with the teams to understand how that technology is changing the work. Like in the example that I shared in payments and wire processing, from doing a lot of data entry and transferring numbers from system A to some system B to actually problem solving and trying to navigate exceptions. Talking about subject matter expertise and what additional expertise might be needed in the business. And then having conversations about the level of change readiness. I think this has been a really good one that's really uncovered oftentimes leaders that think about all of the technology and the processes that are changing, but then they forget to think about the level of impact that that's going to have on the people. And hey, are your people kind of expecting this? Will they be surprised? How do you think your employees are feeling? And really digging into maybe some of that employee survey data, if you're doing a SAT and engagement survey, to really understand where are employees at today as we anticipate a change that's forthcoming. So those are some of the strategic questions. Are there any questions maybe that you're asking your business that you might share with the group, things that you're thinking about, or something related to some of these topics that I've raised? Would love to hear. Deborah, are you hearing anything as you're working with clients?
Well, so I'm hearing several things from clients. I mean, truly, there are some people who are just scared to death of the AI component in general. Okay. Just let's put that out there and then let's set it aside. I think one of the questions that internally, whether regardless of your role of sorts, because there's organizations we work with that don't have HR. So whether you're HR or operations owner, whoever, I think one of the questions is, are people using, known or unknown, how are people using AI right now? In what fashions? Because I
Yeah,
think if you step away from your industry and say, organizations in general, are we using it in sales and marketing kinds of
mm-hmm.
things? I think people can be using it to draft from HR, draft policies, draft job descriptions, draft anything, so you're not looking at a blank screen. And you can be using drafting for marketing language, sales language, anything, right? So how are you, anyone inside the organization, how are you using AI now? And kind of quote unquote a listening tour, an asking tour to find out how are people using it. And I put a note in the chat box. Is anybody using GPT chat from the standpoint of personal or even professional? I've heard several people, non-work related, they're planning their vacations using
Yes.
this. I'm going so and so, and tell me where are the places to stay or restaurants.
Give me an
Let's,
itinerary,
yep.
for 3 days in wherever destination. Absolutely.
And you can put in, I've got children under the age of, whatever that looks like. There's a group of 8 of us. So you can give it some of those particulars. I've even seen somebody use it and give some sets of information and put it in a spreadsheet. Oh, as someone who hates spreadsheets, I would love to have somebody else kind of do the work for me. So being able to kind of look about that, and Terry's putting a note about the discussion about AI and the risk of your opening your electronic system to AI. And I
Yeah,
think that's one of the other questions. What are our risks? And what does that look like in our business? Because I think you can have, and maybe Terry chime in and you can unmute yourself, please. You've got the risk of data, breaches of confidentiality. You've got other kinds of security kinds of risks that people might have. I mean,
absolutely.
to be honest with you, Monique, when you were talking about what you were doing, I was like, could you talk to Facebook? Because I've gotten 2 requests this week. Deborah, did you want to change your password for Facebook? And it's like, I did not ask. I
Right.
did not do that. Could someone please pay attention to Deborah doesn't usually participate in Facebook activities at 2 o'clock in the morning. Have you
Yes,
known me to do that? Hello? You can pay attention to all my other usage. How about that? So
exactly.
I'm just saying, do you think that's me really? No. As
No.
someone who really isn't on it that much. So that means that the activity that has been happening these last couple of weeks, somebody out there is mining my activity. So,
Yeah.
Terry, did you have other things that you were thinking about, Terry, when you were thinking about the risks and the questions? Because, your comment earlier, Monique, also was all about it's been around for a long time. Well, guess what? we share data like nobody's business.
Yes.
And if you
Yes.
don't think that people are using it in some fashion, you're
Yes. Well, and I
sadly
think that
mistaken.
that risk piece is such an important question, and the level of control that you can have. And I think you raise the point that, it's going to vary depending on industry. I can tell you in financial services, we are very highly regulated. But
Yeah.
are we using AI when it comes to, chatbots where our members can learn about products and services and be able to share information about their experiences? Absolutely. But are we, to the level of, integrating, a chat GPT in, having responses as you described, Deborah, crafted by the computer instead of by a person? I think the challenge, if you've seen some of the things when you ask chat GPT to draft you a memo, that technology hasn't gotten right and AI still is not there, is the one thing that a person has that a computer doesn't, is it has empathy. And so being able to read the right level of emotion that needs to go into that response. And I think that's the piece that, again, today consumers are still expecting. They don't want the very generic, blank, emotion free, mostly right answer. They would rather feel a sense of connection, and say, yeah, I feel like you really know me. I am not on Facebook at 2 a.m. And so you're serving up a message to me that is meaningful, it's personalized, but it's also at the right time in the right place.
Hmm.
So let's see, I'm excited to see so Terry was chatting in, we are developing policies and are currently wanting some limits to our system and to how our proprietary items want to be open to exciting and new opportunities. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the balance that we're all trying to strike, is being open to it, but yet, trying to manage it.
Yep. I think Kat wants to weigh in too.
Awesome.
Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, I was going to say one of the things we found good luck with on the groundwork side is the Microsoft platform has some just very basic automation tools.
Yeah.
So we found our department in HR, we were becoming a real big linchpin where promotional changes, transfers all relied on us pushing information. So we actually inverted the whole process. So from one input, it hits 5 support departments. And that was just like a case study that got us a lot of credibility internally. So then we strategically could go back to our stakeholder departments and say, wow, like that task seems really repeatable and mundane. Would you ever automate it? And so finding that one process where we could eliminate a lot of friction changed the narrative on this side, where folks all of a sudden were a lot more receptive once they benefited from it as a stakeholder of ours. So anyway, that's one of my key questions I go to leaders with, is what's repeatable and mundane that could just get delegated to a computer brain. And that's helped us a lot across the business.
I love that. And the fact that that actually creates a tremendous amount of credibility as you're going to the business then to partner with them on ways that they're going to automate, because you're living it, right? So you just become so relatable and credible in that conversation. Thank you for sharing that. That's terrific.
Well, it also, don't you think, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify, but you asked and you listened
Yeah.
and we responded, right? And because even some of the things that were being said earlier, there's communication in terms of your outcomes, Monique. Communication was taking place, and I might even say the word transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we're doing. Here's how it's looking. Here's what we're also thinking about. We're taking the employees' info, but we're also seeing that these might be some outcomes. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about all employees. So this is what we're also going to be doing. And there's a lot of organizations that will not be transparent about what they're thinking or what they're doing until they're making an announcement. And that's a whole lot later than what people are looking for.
Yeah.
And I think people can do and work with and manage change if they know it's coming. It's the surprise and had no time to prep and kind of adapt to the change. And some are slower adapters than others. They kind of need to digest it a little bit. But when it's just sprung on you and it's like, wait a minute, and no input to anything that impacts my job, that's kind of a bit of an ouch.
Yes. Yeah, I love your comment about transparency. And it, it starts very early on. And I think that the absolutely can be instrumental in helping the organization transform successfully and for the employees to have success in the process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I thought I'd just leave you with a couple of, kind of what are some immediate things, whether or not you're having conversations, and hopefully you are or will be, with your business leaders and partners. But just some things independently, even that I think the HR function can be doing and thinking about. And Kat, your example, I need to add that to my, to my list here, because I think, living it and actually modeling what we want to see our business doing is tremendously valuable. But some of the things that we have been contemplating and initiatives and prioritization areas for us have been really around just evaluating our education benefits and training programs, knowing that the business is changing and work is changing and jobs are changing. Do we have the right programs in place? Do we have the right resources available to our employees? So, we've refreshed some of that over the last few years, knowing that we need to be ready and positioned to support the organization. Promoting that continuous learning mindset. And again, looking at, hey, is our on-learning platform, is it the right one? Do we have enough courses? Do we need to expand the courses? Is there a way that we can make it more accessible and where employees can self-serve, like you were talking about, Deborah, but do so in a relevant way? And the talent planning and all of those things with change management that we talked about. So, there is plenty that HR can be doing to be really instrumental and be a business driver and change agent. And most importantly, a really valued strategic partner. So excited to see where the future goes for all of us and for our organizations. And I hope that some of these thoughts and experiences today that you found them helpful.
And you're getting some absolutelys in the chat box, and I would echo that. I would offer you two things that have come along lately in terms of adding to your graphic here. Learning mindset, growth mindset, because
Yes,
it can
yes,
be
yes.
all kinds of things. So the
Love
growth
it.
mindset. And when it comes to like the online learning or micro learning, learning in general, opportunities for self-pace, self-doing, because sometimes we've got these modules, we've got these programs, and our boss is deciding, or we've got time frames associated with, or something like that. And some people are interested in going at it faster. And the answer
Absolutely.
is that sends us a message about where their head's at and what they want. And so, can we put some of that a little bit potentially, depending on how all of you might have this set up, put the learner, put the employee more in the driver's seat? What is it you are trying to do? So your question earlier was their development plan. Where do they want to go? What is it looking like for them? Here's what we've got available. You
Exactly.
guys take it when you want it. We'll know that you guys did, or your manager will talk to you. We'll see it. Reports will pop up or whatever because the data is there for us. But if we do that, then they're telling us what's going on for them. It tells us who wants to be moving on around the corner, up laterally, whatever it is. So I just spending some time with folks on the learning side of things. Let's put them in the driver's seat, because sometimes they feel held back. They can't learn enough. I gotta follow rules, or I can only do so much in the first year, or someone else gets to decide what I sign up for, or this course is mandatory, but I gotta wait a year to get there, or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So
Well said.
I don't know. Too many words. Too many words, Deborah. All right. Other questions for Monique or anybody else in the room as we wrap up our time? Not seeing an emoji hand or anything in the chat box. Seeing some thank yous. And I will just echo that, Monique. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the example, because honestly, I don't know where my head was going to go today, but this was a nice, I think, practical, kind of tactical things we could kind of wrap our head around a little bit. And I would just say continue to pay attention and read and follow
Yes.
in this space.
And I have some great reading opportunities that are really fresh that I'll leave you all with. And there are plenty others out there, but these were particularly good ones and I think relevant for our conversation today.
Oh, terrific. Good, good, good. Well, more than happy to attach the slides out. We tend to send out a notice to folks that says the lunch bunch happened. Those of you in attendance, here you go. Those of you who weren't, here's the link. So
I'll
thank you for
send
your
the slides
time.
your way.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody. Next month, we'll have a topic. I'm going to be with a client. So I actually have a couple staff members who are going to be with us next month. And the lovely, engaging topic of records management in the HR space.
Ooh.
I know everybody, that's a
It's
burning
important.
desire, but it's so important, and it kind of keeps changing. And people are always asking us that question. As an
Yeah.
HR consulting house, people are constantly, the basics never change. Exempt, non-exempt, overtime kinds of stuff, and records management always happen every week. And so being able to know what you need, when you need it, how you need it is on the table. So from this one to all of you, thank you for making this September lunch bunch a good one. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful month. It's fall is here, at least in the state of Oregon. Take care. And we look forward to seeing you in a future program. All the best to all of you guys.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.